What's up, Internet? It's your boy Lucid Trips, aka Third Eye Fry, coming at you with another book review. Today we got Naked Earth by Eileen Chang. Before I get started on this big book review, there's a few things I want to say. Number one, I want to give a special thank out to Kieran of KD Books for not only suggesting this book, but for sending it to me as well. Big ups, he was my first YouTube friend, and he has an amazing channel where he does book reviews all the time, much more often than I do, and he's a lot more eloquent than I am. And clearly he has good book suggestions. So I would definitely recommend checking out his channel. Gonna leave a link down below for you. The second thing is, I don't know who needs to really hear this, but just because you think communism sucks, it doesn't mean you're a fan of capitalism. You're allowed to say you don't like raccoon stew without saying you also like, squirrel burgers. Okay? You could say like, no, they both sound gross. I'm gonna eat some penne pasta. Don't try to limit your way of thinking with just one or the other, black and white, 0 or 1. So, now that we got that out of the way, let's get into it. Naked Earth was written by Eileen Chang, who grew up in China around late 30s, 40s, 50s, so on. She eventually moved, started writing some books. Apparently she got really good at it. This book itself takes place during the 1945, 1955, in between that time. And it takes place during the great land reforms of China. That was one of the great propositions of Maoist communist revolution. Now, there is a lot to learn from this book, and there's a lot to talk about, but I'll start with the first half of this video as being a kind of summary, and then we can take a deeper analysis and see how that relates to the subjects of today, in which case I find this book actually extremely relevant and important. Give me 1 second, it's actually getting hot in here. I'm gonna take off this sweatshirt. Cool. That. All right, so now got that out of the way, let's begin. The book starts following our protagonist, our main boy, Lu. Lu is, typical grunt in the communist Chinese army party, and he is set with being one of the officers to inspect a remote village and bring back details as to how the government will start to redistribute the land that once belonged to the landlords. As Lu is doing this, you find out the methodology that the Communist Party utilizes it to distribute the land evenly is to get a list of transgressions each of the village members have against the landlord, like each problem that they have, record it and write it down. But the thing is, they don't just want each problem they have, they want to go back generations and generations and just record everything from your family history that you see as a problem with this landlord. And that's where you start to see how things can get really bad really quickly. But it doesn't just end there. If a certain citizen didn't have a problem with said landlord or said person that they're investigating, it can often look bad for him, because what if all your friends have a problem with your boss, but you don't personally have a problem? It looks like you're making all of them look bad. So there's a community encouragement to just be enraged and find yourself, and encouragement to find yourself as an oppressed goon. But it goes even further, because even if you didn't have a problem with the landlord and you were fine with dealing with the societal pressure, there's still a legal pressure, because you have these officers who are really like, oh, if this guy doesn't have a problem with this guy, they must be in cahoots with each other. And that starts to look bad, and you start to look like a suspect. And then the officers start to tell you, oh, you don't have a problem? That means this colonizer or this imperialist has tainted your thoughts. You become, quote unquote, an Uncle Tom, like blah blah, like just all this pressure. So it's not worth it. It's beneficial to you, at least on the short term of things, to just find problems with everyone and everything. So Lou starts to see how this unfolds. Needless to say, in this remote village, things start to get a little hairy, but everything works out for the Communist Party. And as the book goes on, Lou is later sent to Shanghai to work for a media company, I think like a printing company, newspaper and whatnot. And he gets cycled around from office to office, inspecting different people. And this is just where things start to get a little... Afterwards, it starts to take a turn for the darker. And I'm not going to spoil the ending. I'm going to ask a question about the ending at the very end of the video, in which case I'll give a spoiler warning. But the book starts to take a turn when some of the people that Lou has started to work with start getting accused by the party of crimes, and it just becomes a mess. And you really see like the layers of corruption that communism tries to fight, but only really, really on the deeper end, only encourages in droves. And the whole thing is about themed around like fighting corruption, for example, but in the ways to make sure everyone's treated evenly, there are subtle ways in which the officers will squabble amongst themselves. Like, for example, everyone knows that they're going to get the same amount of resources and whatnot, but the officers, due to their little, mental games, might fight amongst each other over who gets to distribute what resource. So it could be one officer gets to distribute one kind of seed, another officer distributes another, but the village is in crucial need of only a certain kind of seed. So the officer that distributes it will end up looking like a hero, So there's games being played on every single level. And that's why this book it's really a fantastic work. I really also like how throughout the book you get like little awesome Chinese proverbs that are just so enlightening and kind of funny, just spread out throughout the whole book. My favorite of which would maybe be on page 151. And I'm going to butcher the Chinese, but work with me. It goes, as people say, shi to bu yang, chai to pu chao. A lot of lice, no longer itchy. A lot of debts, no longer worried. So you get nice little things like that inserted and plopped everywhere. And that's just amazing. Now, let's get to the second part of this video. Why is this book so good? Why is it important? Why is it relevant? I always see a mark of a good book that no matter when it's written, you can instantly start seeing parallels in your life and where you're at. So although this book was most likely not thinking about the year 2020 and so on when it was written, maybe she was thinking about it, maybe this year specifically, but you can assume she wasn't. You can easily see how many things within this Maoist communist revolution intersect with, I guess, what I'd call current events today. And what's really, I guess, the most glaring example would be like how an organization like Black Lives Matter conducts itself. Now, it uses communist Chinese tactics from top to bottom, and the funniest part of which, this isn't controversy, the three founders of BLM, I think all of them admitted to being trained Marxists that were inspired by Maoist China, which blows my mind that people just gloss over that. But like a lot of the tactics they'll use are so similar. They'll come up with a slogan that, is catchy and you can't deny. And if you just, question it, you sound like a bad person. Like, Black Lives Matter? Of course they do. Like, who would ever argue with that? But the tactics in which they employ to further their agenda aren't as pure as that slogan. And you can just see how they stoke their fires and recruit people by always preaching how there's oppression and how you've been cheated and how frankly how evil white people are. And they just feed on this racial divide. But then, on the highest level, you find out the founder is buying a house in Topanga Canyon. Now, for most people lives in Topanga Canyon. Now, for most people that don't know California, Topanga Canyon is arguably the whitest neighborhood in the California, maybe even in the U.S. Who knows, right? And to make millions, maybe even billions, or maybe even $1 billion on stoking racial divides, talking about how bad Whitey is, and then all of a sudden moving to a white neighborhood, kind of illustrate. And it's no surprise to me that these people are trained Marxists and idolize Mao, because that's exactly how that corruption works. Make money off your hate, off your oppression. But really, like, you're just monetizing it for your own gain, not to change anything around you, you know? And then it also connects to like how media and layers of government start to collab, and the signs for those kind of things. Because at one point, our main character, Lou, the protagonist, he starts to work for a newspaper agency, and really the newspaper agency can't print the news because they have to walk on ice over what can say, what they can't say, what values are about to be introduced to the public by the Communist Party. Everything has to be like checked with them. Everything has to be like approved by the state before it's printed in this common consensus. And you can be blacklisted or punished if you go against it. And it's also like reminiscent of social media companies and how they are the modern printing press. They're the modern public square. But in the highest level of things, they're really an asset of three-letter agencies like Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. These are multi-billion-dollar organizations. The owners can't snap their finger without affecting millions of lives. At the very basis of it, it would be a national security threat to not have them be an operative of or an asset of three-letter agencies. So on this highest level of things, these are the people that control the conversation. And with the snap of a finger, they can delete your presence and really punish you. And what do people do these days? These mobs of people that often are in alignment with communist principles, or say they are at least, they'll go through people's Twitter history and look for transgressions or whatever from 10, 15 years ago and use that as a basis to cancel someone. And in that regard, it enforces like this cultural narrative that slowly gets further and further and further and further from base reality. And that's essentially how Mao's communist China operated and how it worked. And so that's kind of one of the great things from reading this book. And it really blows my mind how much you can connect what you're seeing now to what Eileen saw then. Okay, now, to wrap this video up, I just want to say I hope this was helpful. I have a question about the ending, so if you don't want spoilers, I hope you enjoyed this video. Feel free to click out now, and I'll catch you later. Now, for those that actually read this book or don't care about the ending, I just have one question. Why do you think Lou chose to stay or go back to China in the very end? That kind of confused me. It really made sense, but at the same time it didn't. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on it. Please leave them down below. All in all, this book is amazing. I highly recommend it. Katie Books, thank you for recommending it. Thank you for sending me. I look forward to reading the other two. I'm going to leave a link to your Katie Books videos down below. And yeah, catch you guys later. Be well.